What's the best nostril jewelry for you? Coming up next on Body Piercing Basics, episode number 116, so you might want to just stick around. For those who are new to the channel, first off, welcome to the channel. I hope you're enjoying the videos. Thank you for watching. I hope that you're finding them edifying, educational, and everything that we hope that they are. But you might not know who I am, even though I say it in every video. My name is DaVo. I'm a professional body piercer and have been since 1994. I own and I operate the Axiom Body Piercing Studio located right here in Des Moines, Iowa, inside Skin Kitchen Tattoo. So, when I talk to you about these things, particularly nostril jewelry, I'm doing so with over 27 years of experience in the body piercing industry. So I might know something. Maybe. So what we're going to talk about today is nostril jewelry. There is such a huge variety, and I know that it can be very confusing which ones are going to be the right ones for you and what is going to work best with your particular situation, what you want for style, and, your lifestyle. So let's go through what are some things that you first off should consider before picking out the jewelry of your choice. First off is material, especially if you are allergic or have sensitivity to certain materials. Of course, before I even get into that, you never want to put sterling or silver in your nostril piercing. Your nostril is a mucous membrane. Silver, as it erodes, will leak out silver salt, and that could lead to silver poisoning, which is a permanent marking or darkening of the area, usually a bluish green color. It's not life-threatening, but it's not pretty. So definitely stay away from anything made of silver. The main materials you're going to see is titanium, niobium, implant-grade surgical stainless steel, 14 karat solid gold or better, and glass. Now, you might see some variations of that, like PVD plating over titanium and various other things. That, if you don't have a lot of sensitivity to materials, may be fine. The only thing I'm really concerned about is the black PVD plating. No one can tell me exactly what it's made out of, and that makes me leery and untrusting. Next thing you want to consider is the flatness of the jewelry. Now, this is extremely important during the healing process because we want that area inside the piercing as flat as possible. Now, even after the initial healing, if you switch from something that is very flat to something that's extremely curved, like a really small ring, this can cause issues. So when thinking about the shape of the jewelry or how flat it is, you really want to consider how long you've had the piercing and how small of a circle are we trying to put in there. And plan on easily, or at least be prepared to easily go back to the original jewelry if possible, or something that's straight and not curved. The next thing is security, because that thing's going to be in there for a while, and you don't want to wake up one morning and find it not there, or after a trip to the grocery store, not find it there. So, security is very important, and it's something you should think about from the very start. Next one is, how easy is it to change? Now, there are some things that I'm going to be talking about today that pretty much require specialty tools to put in and out. They can be difficult to change, so you really need to consider how often you plan on changing the jewelry and if it's going to be logistically possible for you to simply just go into your body piercing studio and talk to your piercer and have them change it for you. And the last thing, number 5, quality versus cost. Of course, the more expensive the jewelry is, generally the better the quality of the jewelry is. I always kind of use the car analogy. Yes, it would be great if everybody was running around driving Mercedes Benzes that never break down, never have any issues, that have a build quality beyond anything you could ever imagine. But the reality is not all of us can afford Mercedes Benz vehicles. So a lot of us drive Fords, a lot of us drive Buicks, a lot of us drive Toyotas, a lot of us drive Hyundais. They are perfectly fine. They're going to get you from point A to point B. However, just like cars, If you're buying the one that's the used one in the back of the lot and you're getting a really good deal, chances are it's not going to hold up very well, and the quality is probably not very good. So understand there's kind of that middle ground that everybody does well in, to the high end. That you start going below that middle ground, you're going to have probably maybe some issues. What about jewelry types? And this is going to be the thing that you want to consider, and I'm going to go through what I think each one of these represents and cover some of the things we just talked about. The first one would be nostril pins. Now, nostril pins are just basically a stud that has no back, nothing on it. It just is a straight piece of wire with a post or a setting of some sort on the other side. They slide in pretty easy. They're really easy to change, but they are not secure at all. If they get caught on something like clothing or a towel or just randomly decide they want to fall out, they will fall out. There is not really anything holding it in there. So they are probably my least suggested for that reason, because they don't stay in very well. The next one is nostril bones. They're similar to nostril pins, except they have kind of a balled up end on them. The disadvantage of this is that you have to put that larger ball through the piercing, and then when you remove it, do the same. A lot of times, this can cause damage to the piercing. Unless you've had it for a really long time, it isn't really wide enough to allow for that ball. And when it does widen up, that piercing, or grows enough, they fall out just as easily as the pins do. So they're not a good choice either. The other problem with both pins and nostril screws or nostril bones is a lot of them, at least that I've come across in my career, are made of sterling. Not something you want to put in your nose, or they're made of stainless steel, which, if you're allergic to nickel, you may have a reaction to. Next on the list is L-bins. L-bins are basically a longer piece of wire. It has a stud on one side or setting, and then it's bent in the shape of an L. These go in fairly easy. They're fairly easy to change, and they're somewhat secure. The problem is they easily fall out. The next option on the list is usually a better option. However, long-term wear, if you're one of those people that changes often and you find especially the nostril screws, which I'm going to get into next, a little bit of a pain in the ass to change, or you have very thick nostrils, the tissue's very thick, you may have better luck with L-bins. It's just the way it goes. After L-bins is L-bins' second cousin, nostril screws. Well, I don't know if it's a second, maybe a first cousin. Basically, it is a question mark bent in half with the curvature wire, that bent curve, sitting inside your nose. This makes it a little bit more secure than the L-bin, because if it does turn past that point, it takes a little bit more effort for it to get around that corner. However, they can be a little bit more tricky to take in and out and change. They also aren't necessarily secure. They can still get caught on things that can still fall out. So they're really something you definitely need to pay attention to. One thing I didn't cover about the L-bin and the nostril screw is they both can be adjusted to make them more secure or more tight. Like I said, the nostril screw, if you have a thick piercing, a long piercing, is going to be a lot more complicated to change, a lot more prone to cause damage during changing the jewelry. And it's probably going to be a bigger pain in the ass. An L-bin may be a better option. Talk to your piercer about it. Next up is the most secure of all types of jewelry, and that is threaded Labret studs. Labret studs have a flat disc on the back, and then on the other side, they have a threaded ball or gem setting that threads into the post. With this, you definitely want internally threaded. 18 gauge on this can be a little tricky because a lot of it's is externally threaded. The biggest disadvantage with this is getting that ball started and also getting that ball unscrewed. Then once you get it unscrewed, removing that piece of jewelry from the inside of your nose. And then when you're putting it back in, figuring out a way to put it in that hole inside your nose. This can be really complicated even for the most seasoned piercer, and will probably require a guide pin to do that. And I'll get into that a little bit more when we talk about threadless, which is next. Threadless is probably the more modern version of threaded jewelry. It is not quite as secure as threaded, but at the same time, it is very secure compared to L-bends, nostril screws, and etc. The thing with threadless is it's the tension of that wire coming off that gem setting or ball that presses against the inside of the post, holding it in place. Now, they can get caught occasionally, and that thing can fall off, but it's pretty darn rare. Just like with the threaded ones, they can come unscrewed. However, the threadless usually is of better quality when you get down into the really thin gauges like 18 and 20, where most nostril piercings are pierced at. However, just like the threaded, you're going to probably need to figure out a way to insert it from the inside outward so that that disc sits on the inside. To do that, you're going to need a guide pin. Now, guide pins or taper pins are usually about anywhere from 1.5 inches to 3 inches long piece of metal. One side is thinner than the gauge that you want. For example, with an 18-gauge taper, probably one tip would be anywhere from 24 to 20 gauge. The other side would be the gauge that you're putting in there, 18 gauge. Specialty ones will have a little piece of wire that perfectly fits inside the threadless post. So you basically push that in from the outside, line it up with that threadless, that piece of wire that comes off the back, put it into the stud, and then push it back through. I plan on doing a video in the future where I change each type of jewelry that I stock, and so look for that here in the near future. With studs out of the way, let's move on to rings. Now, with rings, you're going with that curvature, and I talked a little bit about this before. When you pierce something, it's straight. When you put curved jewelry in it, you're forcing that straight thing to be no longer straight, but curved. The larger the jewelry, the flatter that curve is, or the wider the jewelry, I should say. So a lot of times it will allow you need larger jewelry, especially if you ever consider piercing this or shortly after the piercing is healed. Generally, I advise against piercing with rings. It's usually best just to start out with a stud and then switch to a ring later. The thing is, if you do plan on wearing rings, it's always a good idea to mention that to your piercer when you get pierced. Placement is going to be important because regardless of how long or how well seasoned that piercing becomes, you're still dictated by how far from the bottom of your nostril, so where that piercing is at, how small of a piece of jewelry in the form of a ring you can put in there. For example, if it's pierced 3/8 of an inch above the bottom of your nostril, you're not going to be able to get a tiny little 1/4 inch ring in there. It's not going to fit. That's just physics. Okay, so let's talk about the different types of rings. First one, they're called Nostril Nails. These are my least favorite of all rings. Mainly because they're not fun to put in. Just like threadless jewelry or threaded jewelry, Labret studs, you have to somehow connect it in the center. And this is a ring with a segment out of it and a flat disc. The idea is that you thread this ring through the inside outward, and then that flat disc sits around or on the inside of your nose. They tend to be fairly secure, but they can fall out on their own, and they're really something that I don't really, if you're changing the jewelry often and you're easily frustrated and you can't really fit your 2 fingers up your nose and find that, I really wouldn't advise this type of jewelry. Next one is seamless rings. Seamless rings, you bend them in a corkscrew, and then you bend them back. They either have 2 blunt ends that fit pretty snugly, or some of the better ones have kind of a rounded end on one side and an indentation on the other side. The only problem with seamless is they're fairly easy to change, but it really depends on the material. Like some titanium ones can be very difficult to bend correctly, and they're going to require tools to do so. So it's generally one of those things where it might be okay to get like a annealed surgical stainless steel if you're going to change it a lot, because it's going to be fairly easy. However, over time, because it's annealed, it'll start getting out of shape, and that seam will just seem to get bigger and bigger. The other problem is that you don't want that seam to, even in a healed piercing, to get inside the piercing. There's always a possibility that tissue will start forming inside of it. And that creates a bad situation where the jewelry pretty much has to be destroyed, and hopefully the piercing hasn't closed by the time you figure out that seam's in there and the piercing's growing into it. The next type is the fixed bead ring. This is just like a seamless ring, except has a bead fixed on or soldered on one side. Closure is pretty much the same. It changes pretty much the same. Same issues with titanium, which are really extremely rare and kind of hard to find. Most of this stuff is going to be made in implant-grade steel. Occasionally, you might see something. I have yet to find titanium on a regular basis in this style. Maybe it's just I'm not looking in the right place. But usually, these are going to be implant-grade stainless steel. Now, it really doesn't have that issue with the seam, with it growing into it. They are very secure and fairly easy to change. However, the problem is they do wear out over time. And if you have metal allergies, they may not be your best choice. The next one's the good old-fashioned Catchy bead ring. Catchy bead ring is called the Catchy bead ring because the ring holds the bead captive. Also called tension rings. The ball can be various different designs. They have like gym settings, etc., things that are beaded, and all kinds of fun stuff. The main disadvantage of Catchy bead rings is they can be very difficult to change. It can be hard to get that ball perfectly locked into place. They do take practice. It is a learned skill, and it can be very difficult. So keep that in mind when thinking about it. However, once they're in there, they're not going anywhere. They tend to be very secure and tend to be very versatile, not only in style, but also materials. Pretty much every material that body piercers use, except glass, you can find Catchy bead rings in. Now the last one, hinged or segment rings. Last week I did a whole video on how to change hinged rings or segment rings. Basically these are, or clickers sometimes they're called, is a ring with a segment that is hinged. These are very easy to change. They're very secure if they are of high quality and there isn't that looseness. And you can wear them for a long period of time. I would suggest avoiding having that hinge inside the area or the seam where it unlocks for the same reason with the seamless. However, these seams tend to be a lot tighter and don't loosen up over time. Just like anything in life, though, they can wear out if you change them a lot. So do keep that in mind. And I wouldn't suggest getting anything that isn't titanium or better when it comes to hinged rings. Well, that's it. That's all I have to say today about nostril piercings. If you found this fun, educational, or informative, please give me a thumbs up. Let me know that you liked it. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you're notified every single time we post something. If you have some other suggestions or would like to add to the conversation, please do so in the comments. I usually answer them when I have time. Also, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. Various different t-shirts, wardrobe selections, beach towels, and all kinds of different designs and colors for you to enjoy. Also, there's one of those merch bars down below. Till next time, here's hoping all your piercings heal with ease and without a single issue. And if you're in the Des Moines, Iowa area, I hope to see you for your body piercing needs in the future. Have a good day, everybody. Take care. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Possibly that one or that one.